Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Rob Bowl, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. We'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
Welcome to this episode of the Move Your Business Forward podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jackie Key from Key Principles. Jackie, lovely to have you with me today on this episode. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So today we're going to talk about an aspect of marketing, but very specifically around return on investment, ROI. And I think this is a really interesting topic. I'm an accountant at heart in my background, accountant, numbers, and understanding what am I getting in return for what we're spending. And marketing is one of those tricky areas that I think everyone that runs a business gets frustrated with, because whatever you try to do, there's a very good chance it's not all working as you want it to, or not as planned. So if we start there, the challenges with marketing, and I know you've probably got some stats on this. I think someone told me once, 80% of marketing doesn't work, 20% that does, and you've got to find that. What's your take on marketing not working?
Yeah, the good old 80-20 rule. Potentially that would be the case. I think at the end of the day, it's about being able to track it, and you can track much more granularly than you ever could what's working and what isn't, and move marketing budget about to enable you to make an ROI or a better ROI.
Yeah.
That's just the case now. Years ago, you wouldn't necessarily know. There's so many tracking opportunities, whether it's online or offline, to be honest. You can still track much better than you ever could.
When you're talking about that tracking, ultimately people are spending money on marketing to get good quality leads and turn them into sales. So people measure all kinds of things, from traffic to website, traffic to landing pages, people that have visited the site, and then it's people that have actually interactive to convert to a lead, whether that's filling in a form, whether that's getting in touch, all the way through to they've actually filled in a form. You can actually speak to them and they're a good quality prospect, and you're then in the sales process. So what are the kind of things you think we should be tracking? Because from running a business, what are the things we should be tracking on marketing for the ultimate goal of new business sales?
Yeah, so I think really we should be tracking all marketing activity, whether that's on or offline. As I say, I think if you're an e-commerce business, there's no reason not to have a very clear idea of what your ROI is, especially if you're pretty much not doing any transactions offline. Mm-hmm. It would not be, it's just not practical. It just will happen if you set the tracking up correctly. If you've got, for example, a Shopify website or a WordPress website with WooCommerce, there is absolutely no reason at all why you cannot go down right to the sales level and be able to go backwards to, okay, where did that sale come from? If you're a B2B business, which obviously there's plenty of us out there, it can be more difficult because the transaction will almost certainly happen offline. So you get the form fill, the inquiry come through, and then you've got things like call tracking that you need to put in place, and other aspects that you can look at. But we have clients that want to know that it's working and want to know that the return is there, to the point where, okay, we can change campaigns and finally see that we're making a much better return on investment. So we've got one clear example where a law firm, through a little bit of hard work on their side, can actually tell me that they've generated 50 instructions from the Google Ads.
Yep.
Because they monitor it, because they're monitoring it closely. And And that's perfect. That's the sort of data that we need, because then we know that we're making a return on investment.
It's quite interesting, that, isn't it? Because I think one of the issues I think a lot of companies have when they're working with their marketing agency is aligning the stats and reporting, because there's obviously stuff that you might be doing and you can see because you've got the ability to track these things, and the last thing you might see is someone's filled in a form and it's gone through to a thank you page, whatever. So right, someone's definitely filled in a form. Then you're a bit blind, because essentially all of that's fallen into the client side of their CRM or tracking software or whatever they're using. And often I think it can be forgotten, actually, where did that lead come from? Where did that new client come from? And if you don't know as the marketing agency, you can't then add that in quickly to the right. That if that's working, let's do more of that and maybe less of other things that aren't working. And there's a big communication thing there, isn't there? Because I think a lot of people sat in their business are expecting marketing people to deliver reporting and demonstrate what's going on, but you also need to know what's happened client side when it's gone out of your line of sight.
Absolutely. I mean, with this one particular client, it's quite an interesting case in itself, because we'd been generating probably the same volume of inquiries for a number of months with them. And then we sat down and they said, well, we seem to be stuck at this number of instructions on a monthly basis. And when we drilled down, we realized that, okay, there was one campaign that was probably generating the majority of the instructions. Actually, we switched that campaign off. We did a test with the client. We said the cost per inquiry will be higher, but we believe by giving the budget to these other campaigns, we'll generate better quality inquiries.
Yep.
And that's exactly what happened. Literally, it went from 30 instructions one month to 50 instructions the next, because we made changes having discussed the quality of the leads that were coming through. And that's probably how close you need to be to the client to be able to know that actually there's an issue and we need to identify it. So we're always asking for feedback on the quality of the leads that are coming through.
And this is clearly all part of the making sure you can measure your ROI, because if you don't know what's happened. So what kind of interaction would you expect to have between your side of the fence being the agency and the client? How often would you expect to be talking or feeding back that info?
It depends on the client, but it could be weekly, it could be every other week, it could be monthly, depending on how it's working and is it working well. And if we don't hear from a client, we invariably know it's working well.
It's funny, that, isn't it? Because I think I've done my own marketing, I'm doing my own marketing, I've seen many other companies do this, and I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? If you, as you say, if it's going well, you're probably not going to hear from that client, which is almost the wrong thing to do, right? It's like, well, if something is working well and you can actually link in to what is working well, then we could probably make it work even better and make sure we're actually spending 100% of our spend on the right thing, rather than still, it's working but only 20%, and therefore we're still wasting some money. We should be able to be more intelligent around focusing on expanding that 20% that is working. That would be my kind of thought process.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we can do some of that without too much client interaction, just in terms of optimizing campaigns and identifying where search terms just aren't relevant, for example, with Google Ads, and just making sure that those adverts then don't appear for those search terms. But yeah, until you know the quality of what you're generating, it is difficult. Of course, if we've got access to client CRMs and the tracking is in place, then we can start to see that ourselves anyway.
Yeah.
We don't generally have that much sight of that information, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not with most clients anyway. But obviously with CRMs, then you do have the advantage of being able to see it hopefully all the way through, even if it is B2B, even if it is happening offline.
Yeah. So for larger companies that I work with and have seen, where you've got in-house marketing and sales, I think there's a kind of opportunity for them to work even closer together than ever before. So it's interesting, isn't it, that when you're working with a client, there's an immediate blocker there to being as successful as you can be if that marketing and sales engine, one being external, one being internal, is not talking to each other. So how do we solve that, or how do companies get that and make more of that?
It's a really interesting point, actually, that you make, because I mean, I started off in-house and within companies, as it were, and the tension between sales and marketing, I think that's just always going to be there. I've read recently, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but certainly marketing is playing a bigger role in some respects in the sales process, whether sales like it or not, because of the internet, because so much can be viewed online. The potential client, the prospect, will have done research before they get in touch with you, and the front-facing element before the sales call potentially is a massive thing. So the tension's going to be there, but somehow you have to get everybody on board. It's really interesting, because one of the first marketing role, or no, probably my third marketing role actually I took up, I was working with the sales team. They had responsibility for revenue. I was in the marketing department, and I was bonused on revenue and profit.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to work with me to the extent that if they wanted to do a special price, they had to come to marketing to get the special price, because I had the total picture for the business and they only had part of it. So I'd then go away and do my calculation and say, okay, looking at where we are, we can do this. And that actually forced sales and marketing to work together. So that's one option in terms of how you incentivize people basically to actually work together.
And I think the other point here is, and I've been in danger of quoting every stat that's 80% related, but this is another stat where through research, that when buyers come to that point of either filling in the form or getting in contact through telephone or whatever methodology it is, they're 80% of the way there to making that final buying decision. So it's almost like the role of sales is almost like, don't screw it up. It's not actually selling anymore. It's all that work's been done. The prospect is 80% of the way there, from the ability to look online, whether it's reviews, whether it's just looking at people's profile, if it's more, a service type business. They've got 80% of the way there. And then the job of sales is, not screw it up. You're right. That's a different dynamic to what we would have had in the past. And almost shows it's even more important that what happens in the marketing side of that experience, and ultimately marketing, in my kind of one way to describe marketing, is anything that makes selling easy, right? So anything that's happened before that point to make the sale easy is what marketing is all about. And that could be multiple touch points, multiple aspects. Someone's seen your brand through an ad, through something a period of time ago, years, months, whatever. All of those things are building up an image and perspective of your brand. And it's then a perspective, right, ready to buy, pretty much 80% of the way there. And sales has got to kind of get it over the line and not screw it up. But measuring all of that is tricky, right? Measuring actually at what point of marketing has led to that and how efficient it's been is a challenging aspect.
It is. I mean, there is sort of an attribution model that you can use. So years ago, for example, Google Analytics and Google Ads, it was sort of last click attribution. It isn't that anymore. So you have the opportunity to actually almost say, oh, well, that helped by 0.25%, and that helped by this percent. And so you can sort of see how it might all all linked together. But probably, I must admit, I don't know for definite, but I imagine a lot of the CRM systems won't necessarily have that attribution model.
Yeah.
But certainly Google does, because Google wants to take a percentage of the conversion, if you like. That's why sometimes it's a bit weird when a client will say to us, well, how can the inquiry rate or the number of inquiries be 25.6? And it's because of this attribution model that Google are using.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, nothing works in isolation. I mean, yeah, things don't work in isolation. There are other aspects that go into it. And I think it's Salesforce stat that says, all about the number of touch points that you need before people will inquire. And I think it is quite high, up into the sort of 9s maybe.
Yeah.
But let's not downgrade what the sales guys have got to do, shall we?
No, 100%. No, 100%. But I think the link between sales and marketing has never been so important as it is now, and it's probably only going to be more important over time.
Definitely.
So just kind of bringing some of these points to a close. I mean, if you were giving advice to anyone running a business, looking for more sales and looking to invest in marketing, and whether they're coming to you as a prospect or whether they're talking to any agency or even their own agency or even their own internal team, what would be your top tip for them in terms of making sure they've got a focus on ROI and asking and expecting the right things from whoever's delivering that service?
I would say that the key question, well, it wouldn't even be a question necessarily, but any proposal that we send out to a client, to a potential client, will always include reviewing the tracking, whether they've got it there or not. And a lot of people think they have. We always review the tracking, because we want to know that what we're doing is going to make a difference. But if you can't track it, you can't improve it. It's impossible. If it doesn't, if the agency isn't concerned about tracking and reporting, because we also do reporting, if the agency isn't talking to you about that, then that's just quite strange. because whether it's an internal marketing department or if we sort of treat us as an external marketing department, we still got to show our worth. That we're making a difference.
So tracking, anything else that would be on your top tips to give someone?
We always do an ROI calculation. So we'll look at the types of activities that we think a potential client should be looking at, and then we'll do calculations for the various platforms. We will be asking clients what their average order value is, what their average profit is, what their conversion rate is if it's offline. What is their conversion rate from an inquiry to a sale, so that we can do that ROI calculation. And that calculation includes our fee. So it's return on investment, not return on ad spend.
That makes sense. And then the other point I think that's important here is the tracking of where things have come from, but then ultimately the quality of these things as well, I think, is important. So what would be your tips around that? Quality of conversion, quality of lead? How do you generally describe that and make sure that that's delivered as expected, or as good as it can be expected?
I think it's much easier, obviously, if it's all online. It's about conversion rate optimization, effectively, which is your agency or your marketing department need to be clearly looking at that on a regular basis and trying to improve the conversion rate. When that's happening offline, you do need feedback. What I would say is we're like, for example, if we're setting up campaigns, whether it's on whatever platform it might be, we are looking at who is your ideal customer, and let's get in front of that ideal customer. Let's not worry about all the others. And there are ways of doing that, whether it's with search terms with Google and Microsoft, or whether it's with having a very, very clear idea of what the customer advertised, so that when you go and set up a Facebook advertising campaign, you're getting audiences that are close as can be to that ideal customer, if you like.
Yeah, no, understood. No, that makes sense. Okay. Look, I think we're gonna have to bring this to a close because we're out of time. Final point you'd make on ROI? For anyone listening to this, what would be your big thing on marketing ROI you want to get across?
If you're not tracking it, start tracking it as soon as you can.
Yeah, perfect. Great. Well, look, Jackie, I think that's a good message. Track it. And as you say, unless you're tracking it, you can't question it. You can't look to improve it or figure out what of that percentage is doing the right thing. So no, that's great. Look, Jackie, I really enjoyed talking to you on this today, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. But yeah, thank you for joining me on this episode.
All right, thank you. Thanks
for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.